Florida taxpayers should not have to pay for this, and the Trump administration is trying to hold people accountable and make them pay their own debts. But this has got a lot of people really upset. And in their minds, it doesn't matter if you went to college or not, and it doesn't matter if you already paid off your own student loans. These college grads think you should be the one paying for their gender studies college degree. In this video, I'm going to show you how colleges are getting away with charging outrageous fees for stupid classes like surviving the zombie apocalypse, that's real, how Biden's loan forgiveness plan shifted the bill to Florida taxpayers, and how people with six-figure salaries are getting bailed out while blue-collar workers pay the bills. Let's jump in. All right, let's break this down. The federal government is finally done playing nice when it comes to student loans. Starting next month, the Department of Education is coming after people who flat out stop paying back what they owe. That means collections are kicking off and it's gonna hit Florida hard. So right now, over 5.3 million borrowers across the country are in default. These aren't just late payments, we're talking people who completely stop paying. Here in Florida, total student loan debt has hit $105.5 billion. That means we got close to 2.7 million people in this state alone carrying student debt, with the average borrower owing around $39,000. That's a lot of cheese. And who are these people that think they shouldn't have to pay back their loans at all? Check it out.
You f***ers that keep saying, why should my tax dollars pay for other people's student loans? One, go yourself. If your tax dollars did pay for student loans, it's because you're investing in society as a whole. A rising tide lifts all boats.
This whole student loan thing is not going to work out how Trump thinks it is. It's going to end in a class action lawsuit with him losing, because those student loans are going to end up being forgiven because he's taking illegal activity on them. MAGA, feel free to come in my comments and tell me I'm wrong, since none of you have student loans because none of you went to college.
And guess why these people stopped paying their debt? Because they got sold this BS loan forgiveness story, when what it really means is someone else is gonna have to pay for it. You. But now the Trump administration is finally stepping in and saying enough is enough. Education Secretary Linda McMahon said this.
We have, almost $1.7 trillion in student debt, and none of the collections have been made since March of 2020. So it's time to have people be accountable again for their debts. So we're trying to put lots of plans in place so that people who do have loans outstanding can bring themselves up to date. You know, we have over 5 million people that are in default. And that means their credit scores are affected. If they want to buy a home or buy a car, it's very difficult for them. So we'd like to help them get out of default. But at the same time, this is something they owe. This is money they borrowed to go to school. And other taxpayers shouldn't have to pay this burden. I think that's very clear.
She's right. And here's what really pisses people off. This whole setup punishes the ones who did things the right way, like the guy who went to college and paid off his student loans, or the family that worked extra jobs to pay for their kids' tuition, or the guy who didn't go to college and became an electrician right out of high school to avoid student loan debt. Now, they're the ones that could get stuck paying for someone else's bad decisions. That's why people in Florida are so fired up. Why should these responsible, hardworking people be left holding the bag? Now, I can't just blame an 18-year-old kid for racking up all kinds of debt. Kids are told their whole life that they need to go to college, so they go. It doesn't matter if they have no idea what they want to do. The whole system sets them up for failure and to be debtors. And the universities have turned this into one big giant scam. Here's how it all started. Back in 1958, the government started funding student loans with the National Defense Education Act. The goal was to help Americans compete with the Soviets by funding education, so especially in science, math, and engineering. Sounds like a great idea, right? But that system was built for a totally different world. Back then, college was cheap, jobs were stable, and you could actually afford to pay back a loan. Fast forward to today, and tuition has exploded up 180% above inflation from 1980 to 2020. Meanwhile, wages have barely moved. So you got kids taking out massive loans to pay for college, and when they graduate, they only end up making, on average, around $55,000 a year. That's it. A licensed plumber in his first year out of trade school or an apprenticeship can make more than that. And all this didn't happen by accident. Former Education Secretary William J. Bennett warned us about it years ago. It's called the Bennett hypothesis. And it says the more the government subsidizes college loans, the more colleges raise tuition. And he was right. In 1990, average tuition at a four-year public college was around $3,800, adjusted for inflation. Now, over $10,000. Private colleges are charging $40,000 to $50,000 a year. And for what? Some of these places are offering classes like Surviving the Zombie Apocalypse. That was a real class at East Tennessee State in 2022. This is the kind of stuff student loans are paying for. Meanwhile, colleges are building luxury dorms and rock climbing walls like they're selling resort packages. Universities keep raising prices because they know the government's gonna keep handing out loans. And kids keep signing up because no one teaches them how borrowing works. It's like giving 18-year-olds blank checks and then being shocked when they end up buried in debt. And in Florida, around 1 million people have student loan debt without a college degree. So more than likely, those loans are funding wasteful education, and the only people getting rich off it are universities. And the craziest part to me is, these schools force students to take general education classes that have nothing to do with their major. At the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, that can cost you an extra $12,000 to $21,000, which comes out to around 40% of your total college tuition. For what? So a business major can take a class in art appreciation or gender theory? You cut out the fluff, you cut out the woke nonsense, and people could graduate faster and with less debt. But colleges won't do that because fluff is how they keep the money rolling in. Universities are the only ones that never lose, and they got zero skin in the game. They get paid up front whether a student graduates or not, and they don't lose money if the borrower defaults. So there's no risk and all reward. If a bank gave out mortgages like this, they'd be bankrupt in a week. Now, here's where things get really shady. Biden wanted to cancel student debt, and by cancel, I mean transfer that to you and me, the taxpayer. He's not forgiven anything, he's just moving the bill from the student to the plumber, the electrician, and the waitress who didn't go to college. Back in June 2023, the Supreme Court told Biden he couldn't move forward with his big student loan forgiveness plan. He was trying to cancel up to $20,000 per borrower using something called the HEROES Act. But the court stepped in and said, nope, you can't do that without Congress. So that plan got shut down. On a side note, I love how they slap these great names like the HEROES Act on these horrible bills. Remember the Patriot Act? The one that gave the US government the right to spy on us? That's another video. Moving on. But Biden didn't just drop it. He turned around and found another way. He started using existing programs to cancel debt in smaller chunks. So far, he's wiped out over $183 billion in loans without needing approval from Congress or the court. Now, technically, he didn't break the rules. He didn't push the exact same plan that the court blocked, but let's be real, he walked through a side door after they slammed the front door shut. He didn't follow the spirit of the ruling, and he knew it. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. He didn't do this out of the kindness of his heart. This was about votes. Biden knew he was going to run for a second term, and he figured if he canceled your debt, there's a pretty good chance you're going to return the favor at the ballot box. That's not leadership, that's buying votes with taxpayer money. Because all that forgiven debt, it didn't disappear, it just got dumped on the rest of us. Now, don't get me wrong, student loans aren't a bad thing. There's a ton of people out there that are doctors, lawyers, engineers, and teachers that couldn't have done it without the loan program, that are actively repaying their loans or have already paid them off. But for the people who haven't made a payment since 2020 and think taxpayers need to pay your bills, you might be in big trouble. When the government says they're restarting student loan collections, they're not messing around. If you're in default, they got a lot of tools to come after you. They can take part of your paycheck before it even hits your bank account. That's called wage garnishment. They can also grab your tax refund. So if you thought you were getting a nice check back next year, think again. And if you're on Social Security, yep, they can take that too. I suggest you start paying and take advantage of some of the programs they got to get you current on your loans. Now let's talk about what's really going on behind the scenes. These student loans are basically predatory. Think about it, students are taking out loans that cost as much as a house, but with no collateral and no ability to declare bankruptcy to get out of it. You get trapped. These loans are being handed out to people with no proven income, no credit, and no clue how they're gonna pay it back. If a regular bank handed out loans like this for anything else, they'd be shut down. Universities are coming out the big winners in this system. And while everyday people are getting squeezed, just trying to pay their own bills, elite schools like Harvard are sitting on mountains of cash. Harvard has a $50+ billion endowment, yet it still receives millions of dollars in federal funding every year. So first, what the heck is an endowment? Think of it like a giant savings account for a university. People donate money to the school and Harvard invests it, but instead of spending all of it, they just spend the profits from those investments. The endowment keeps growing while the school uses the interest to fund buildings, staff, scholarships, and research. It's a great idea, but here's the crazy part. That $50 billion endowment, that's more than the GDP of some small countries. For instance, Haiti's GDP is around 21 billion. Harvard's sitting on more than double that, yet somehow they're still getting money from taxpayers like you and me. One way they get it, federal research funding. That's basically when the government gives Harvard money to study stuff like medicine, climate change, computer science, you name it. For example, in 2022, Harvard got over $625 million in federal research dollars, mostly from agencies like the National Institute of Health and the Department of Defense. Now here's the part that gets me fired up. Thanks to something called the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980, when professors or scientists at Harvard invent something using taxpayer money, like a new drug, medical device, or technology, they get to keep the patent. The government doesn't get a cut of the profits, and the only thing the government gets is a free license to use it, but they can't sell it or collect royalties. So let's say a Harvard professor invents a life-changing cancer drug with federal grant money. They patent it, a big pharma company buys it, and boom, they get filthy rich. Meanwhile, you paid for it and you don't see a single penny. Not even a discount on the drug if you gotta use it. And here's another fun fact. 80% of colleges, including public universities, are run as nonprofits. Harvard's a tax-exempt institution classified as a 501c3 nonprofit under US tax law. This status exempts it from federal income taxes on its educational and research activities, as well as certain property and state taxes, because it operates for charitable, educational purposes. And that $50 billion endowment I told you about, that's tax exempt too. And so are all the donations they bring in, yet they still receive federal taxpayer money. So yeah, when you hear Harvard crying poor or asking for more funding, just remember, they got $50 billion in the bank. They get your money to do research and they get rich off what they invent, all without giving anything back to the taxpayers who made it happen. Sound fair? Now here's what we need to do to stop this mess from getting worse. First, we gotta start holding colleges accountable. If you're handing out degrees in stuff like underwater basket weaving or gender theory that don't lead to real jobs, then you shouldn't get a dime of federal money. Why should taxpayers fund degrees that don't pay off? If your graduates can't land jobs that help them pay back their loans, maybe your degree isn't worth much. We gotta stop treating every college course like it's equally valuable, because it's not. Second, let's cut the junk. No more fluff classes. No more DEI programs that focus on skin color, gender, or who someone dates. That doesn't belong in a classroom. We should be teaching hard work, real-world skills, and how to compete based on merit, not identity politics. If Governor DeSantis can clean this stuff out of Florida's colleges, then the rest of the country can follow his lead. Third, let's prioritize U.S. citizens when it comes to college admissions. Taxpayers are the ones paying the bills through student loans and subsidies, so shouldn't their kids get to be priorities? Out of around the 1,600 freshmen Harvard accepts every year, around 240 are from other countries, which means fewer spots for the 25,000 U.S. valedictorians that come out of high schools every year. That makes no sense. And last, expand trade schools and apprenticeships. We need more electricians, welders, HVAC techs, cosmetologists, blue-collar jobs that pay real money. Let's put the funding where it actually helps people. I didn't go to college. I was a crane operator for 25 years, and that great paying job is how I got into real estate. Blue-collar jobs built this country, and it's time we stop treating them like a backup plan. Not every kid needs a 4-year degree, but every kid deserves a shot at a great paying job. Floridians should not be on the hook for paying other people's student loan debt, and I'm glad the Trump administration has finally made that perfectly clear. But let's be honest, the bigger problem is how these universities are running things. Something's gotta change with this whole system. Student loan forgiveness sounds nice, but in reality, it's just shifting the burden from the person who took out the loan to the person who didn't, especially when the top 20% of earners hold 3 times more student loan debt than the bottom 20%. This isn't about helping the poor, it's about giving a tax-funded gift to the doctors, lawyers, and MBAs. Meanwhile, the guy who paid his own way or skipped college altogether, he's got to pay their bill, and that ain't right. There's another big problem going on in Florida right now that nobody's talking about. Click here to find out how illegals in Florida are using DoorDash to do this. Because behind that knock on your door could be someone you were never expecting. You need to know about this. Click here and I'll see you there.